Petroleum Industry Bill. First drafted in April 2000, the bill represents a nation's attempt at introducing a comprehensive reform in the oil and gas sector with a view to making the sector more transparent and accountable, less prone to abuses, and environmentally safe. 30 years down the line, this bill remains a piece of legislation in the works, thereby earning for itself a place in history as the most delayed piece of legislation in post-independent Nigeria. Good evening, viewers, and welcome to this edition of Energy This Week. I'm Ademola Adedoyin.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. We strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
Our focus this week is the Petroleum Industry Bill. But before then, let's take you through events, activities, and development in the energy sector during the week.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome to News of the Week. My name is Azizat Sani. First, the headlines. Federal government disburses 56.8 billion naira petrol subsidy claims to oil marketers. Reduce over-dependence on oil, RMAFC asks federal government. Government moves to criminalize oil spillage. Now the details. The federal government has remitted fresh 56.8 billion naira as subsidy claims to oil marketers. The payment was confirmed by the Minister of Finance, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, on Monday in Abuja. In a statement issued by the Minister's Special Advisor on Communications, Mr. Paul Nwabuku, he said the fresh 56.8 billion naira brought the total amount released so far for the 2013 fiscal period to 192.50 billion naira. According to the statement, 19 oil marketers with about 39 claims benefited from the fresh subsidy payment. The statement further explains that the payment was made in line with the commitment of the Federal Ministry of Finance to manage fuel subsidy payment in a transparent and efficient manner that would protect and enhance the interest of the Nigerian people. You will recall that Energy This Week did a comprehensive review on the issue last week. The Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, RMAFC, Monday called on the federal government to reduce its over-dependence on oil and gas and broaden its economic base through diversification. RMAFC Chairman, Engineer Elias Mbam, who made the calling during a zonal advocacy workshop on economic diversification and enhanced revenue generation, Southeast Zone, in Abakaliki, stressed that the nation's economy must be diversified to guarantee actualization of the various socio-economic development programs of the government. In a bid to protect the nation's environment, the federal government has commenced moves to make oil spillage a criminal offense, the Minister of the Environment, Mrs. Hadisa Milafia, has said. Milafia said in Abuja that the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, a parastatal under the Ministry of the Environment, had presented the bill to the National Assembly. According to the minister, the ministry is working on the proposed bill presented by Nostra to the National Assembly, which will place and execute more stringent measures on the oil companies that pollute the environment. That's all for the News of the Week. Join us again next week. My name is Azizat Sani.
The Petroleum Industry Bill, by now, has earned the unenviable distinction as the most delayed piece of legislation in post-independent Nigeria. First drafted in April 2000 by the Rewano Lukman-led Oil and Gas Reforms Implementation Committee, The Petroleum Industry Bill, currently under consideration for passage into law by the 7th National Assembly, has received so much tinkering and battering in the last 13 years, but like the proverbial cat with 9 lives, has survived all onslaught. The bill, which seeks to bring all the existing laws, enactment and decrees guiding operations in the oil sector under a single legislation, has no doubt emerged as the most ambitious bill, if not the most controversial, to be sent by the executive to the legislature since the advent of democratic government in 1999. Specifically, the PIB provides legal, fiscal, and reform framework that will govern this all-important sector in the years ahead. The original idea behind the bill was to introduce comprehensive reform in the oil and gas sector with a view to deepening government's earnings and encourage investment through provisions that will make the industry less prone to corruption and more transparent and accountable. Although its first draft was done in 2000, it was not until 2008 that it was first presented to the 6th National Assembly. However, efforts to pass it by that assembly was scourged by high-wire politics and legislative bickering. It was left in the cooler until January 2012, following the mass protest that greeted the government's attempt to hike price of fuel and the government's sweeping reforms of the sector that took place in the wake of that national protest. In January 17, 2012, the federal government set up a PIB technical committee led by Senator Udo Udoma. The job of the committee was to review the 2009 version of the bill. The final work of the Udo Udoma-led technical committee had about 16 pieces of petroleum legislations repealed, while all the other laws were aggregated into a single piece of comprehensive legislation. The revised bill was forwarded to the National Assembly by the Honorable Minister of Petroleum Resources, Mrs. Diezani Alison Madueke, on July 18, 2012, for consideration and passage into law. 11 months and many legislative bickering later, the bill is still under consideration for passage by the lawmakers in the 2 houses. A major plank of the bill is the establishment of a fiscal framework that encourages investment and increased revenue inflow to the government. Maintaining this delicate balance is what appears to have given the bill its biggest headache. The bill provides for the payment of company income tax at 30% by all companies engaged in upstream petroleum operations, and another Nigerian hydrocarbon tax at either 50% for onshore and shallow areas of no more than 200 meters depth, or 25% for bitumen, frontier acreage, or deep-water areas. On the whole, the total government take in joint venture operations went up a notch higher by 1% from the current 87% to 88%. As far as international oil companies are concerned, the bill is not only investment unfriendly, it is a piece of legislation that will set the existing work program back and by implication work against the nation's interest. The IOCs, who produced about 70% of the nation's daily 1.4 million barrels crude oil daily, are uncomfortable with the Minister of Petroleum Resources sweeping powers to prescribe royalties, fees, and rental payable by oil companies. They are equally ill at ease with such fiscal regime change as the proposed replacement of investment tax allowance with production-based incentive. But there are strong voices supporting the fiscal regime put in place in the bill, saying that the IOCs are only being self-centered and concerned with huge profits at the expense of the nation. This school of thought argues that the provision for the minister to prescribe royalties, fees and rentals payable by the oil companies is not new, as it has always been in the Nigerian law. Furthermore, it was argued that the proposed government take, placed at 70% at the end, is lower than the 76% of government takes according to the current Angola fiscal terms. Other countries such as Saudi Arabia and Libya all have higher percentage of government take in the fiscal terms. The PIB, however, is not all about fiscal regime and tax controversy. For instance, The bill sets out to unbundle the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the NNPC, and form a national oil company that the private sector players can invest in and grow into a global brand such as Petrobras of Brazil and Petronas of Malaysia. In the downstream sector, while the bill seeks to put an end to the regime of fuel subsidy and enthrone deregulation, it also seeks to put in place the Petroleum Equalization Fund to provide the fund needed for ensuring fuel price uniformity across the country. Analysts feel the idea of PEF contradicts the spirit of deregulation regime in which market forces should ordinarily determine price. With the PIB, will the subsidy regime end? That is the billion-naira question. Another major feature of the PIB is the provision for the remittance on a monthly basis 10% of the upstream petroleum company's net profit to host community fund. The fund generated is set aside to develop oil-producing communities. It is perhaps the most contentious provision on the bill as it has divided the nations along regional lines. Both sources hinted that the National Assembly is negotiating and working at resolving the controversy generated by the provision. Overall, the PIB remains the boldest move to comprehensively address all the issues in the oil industry and put in place a legislation that reflects contemporary realities. It may not be a perfect piece of legislation, but a great step forward has been taken. For the industry, things can only get better once the National Assembly gives its final nod and Mr. President, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, signs it into law.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. We strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
To do justice to the issue of the week, the PIB, we went in search of one of the best authorities in petroleum law, Dr. Adeoye Adefulu. Adeoye Adefulu is a partner in the law firm of Odujiri and Adefulu, with over 13 years professional experience spanning the fields of petroleum law and policy, electricity law and policy, environmental law, corporate and project finance. He obtained his law degree from the University of Lagos and was called to the Nigerian bar in 1998. He also holds a master's and doctorate degrees from the Center for Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy, CEPMLP, Scotland, where his thesis focused on reform of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. Adeoye has acquired significant professional experience through his involvement in various projects for public and private sector clients and has advised on a number of Nigerian energy reform initiative programs. Through his research work and professional experience, Adeoye Adefulu has developed a keen understanding of the policy, legal and regulatory frameworks for the Nigerian energy industry. He takes a particular interest in oil and gas regulatory reform, energy mergers and acquisitions, electricity reform, renewable energy and environmental law issues. Adeoye is the managing editor of petroleumindustrybill.com, the only website dedicated to providing up-to-date news, information, and analysis of the petroleum industry bill. Dr. Adefulu, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here.
Let us start on a very controversial note. Under the PIB, a tax has been introduced known as the Nigerian hydrocarbon tax to replace the existing petroleum profit tax. This tax will apply only to the profits of the upstream sector companies. The tax is at either 50% for onshore or 25% for frontier acreages or deep waters and so on. Now, we also talk about the company income tax, which is fixed at 30%. On the whole, the total government take in joint venture operations went up a bit higher by just 1% from 87%, to 88%. Why do you think the international oil companies are uncomfortable with this marginal increase?
Okay, thank you for starting on a controversial note. I think this is actually one of the most important issues in the petroleum industry bill, and it probably speaks to the ongoing debate between the National Assembly, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and the international oil companies, as well as, I think, obviously NNPC is a major player here. You've characterized as a marginal increase of 1%. I think there are certain debates as to whether it's 1%, slightly more, and the question also centers around really what areas are the tax in which areas are the tax increases. So, for example, upstream taxation of upstream gas has gone up significantly from 30% on the face of it to about 80 something percent. That's significant. If you say that what we want to do in Nigeria is to develop our gas fields, etc., you need to make sure that the incentives for gas production remain. Under the current regime, under the proposed regime rather, those incentives are lost, and that's a significant play. So you may think that you may say that it's a marginal increase. There are even debates about those figures of 87 and 88%, but also you need to look at the specific areas where the increases occur. In addition to the gas that I mentioned, there are also increases in the deep offshore areas. And the increases may not come in the form of the tax figure, but by the time you look at the deductions that have been made, that have been removed, and some of the non-allowables, etc., you find that those figures have a significant impact on the investment levels or the proposed investment levels for international companies that operate in the deep offshore areas. And so that's where the debate is now. And the question for the National Assembly, really, which sort of arbitrates, stands as an arbiter between the NNPC and the Ministry of Petroleum Resources on one hand, and the IOCs on the other hand, is where is the truth in the figures that are being proposed? IOCs are saying something that is diametrically opposed to NNPC, Ministry of Petroleum Resources. That's the key thing. And my advice really is that the National Assembly needs to get independent advice on what is real and what is, what is the potential impact on the oil and gas industry in Nigeria.
Yeah, Dr. Adefulu, industry players appeared worried over the clause that gives sweeping powers to the minister. In that clause 6, the minister could actually approve royalties, fees, rentals, payable by the oil companies. And the IOCs appear very, very uncomfortable with this because they see it as an impediment for them to plan, to invest. What is your take on this?
Let me start by saying this. The royalty regime being in regulations, it's not a new thing. Under the petroleum production and drilling regulations at the moment, we actually have royalty regime in there. You'll also see that the marginal fields royalty regime is also in regulations issued by the minister. So it's not a new development in Nigeria. There are some royalties for certain areas that are fixed by legislation. That's the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Act. It actually has royalties that are imprinted in that act. But there are also, as I've mentioned earlier, regimes that are actually fixed by regulations. What the IOCs are concerned about essentially is, if the regime is going to change significantly, as has been indicated, we need to know right from the word go what our obligations are going to be going forward, so that we can plan and we understand the impact of the tax, the royalties and the rentals on us, on our operations. I think that's the concern. And there are many ways you can deal with this. One is to put the proposed royalty regime, attach that as an appendix or a schedule to the Act. And if you feel that the ministerial flexibility is that important, allow the minister to amend that based on specific criteria. So that's an option to deal with it. The second option is just to place it right within the Act right now, so that everybody's clear about what the position is.
Yeah, I think that is exactly what they're asking. What they're asking.
So I think those options are available, but certainly the structure as it is not very it's not very attractive, because you are concerned that on day one you don't know the full extent of the fiscal impact, and you want to know that.
The IOCs, they are also very ill at ease by the fact that a lot of non-deductibles, those under PPT were retained and others were added. For instance, penalty for gas flaring and all that come under non-deductible expenses. We also have things like expenditure for the purchase of seismic data and all of that, other non-deductibles. Will you say these are clauses that will actually encourage investment in the upstream sector?
Well, I mean, what I would do is I'll take a broader look at the provisions. I think what a lot of us have done, and the National Assembly, etc., is to look at specific provisions of this Act. But one has to have a holistic picture. So what does this look like, and what impact does it have? And model that picture. Now, unfortunately, I'm a lawyer, and lawyers will run away from figures. Modeling is not my forte, but I would say that I'd rather that all of us take a broader look and ask the questions around what is the impact of this broad picture on upstream operations going forward. I think that would be the approach that I would take.
Okay, so when you take such broad approach, how will you say that investor, be it IOC, be it a national oil company, be it independent player, how will you say they've come off in the PIB?
Well, I think everybody agrees that the investors have come off worse. I don't think that the Ministry of Petroleum Resources debates this. The question is the degree as to how bad off we are. That's the question, and there are contrasting views. The Ministry of Petroleum Resources says it's a marginal increase. The IOCs have indicated that it's much more significant. But we also hear from the Nigerian players complaining about the regime. So we need the National Assembly to actually take that look and say, get an independent person to come and assess what that impact is. And there are many, many resources available to us as Nigerians. You could hire a consultant. I know that the Commonwealth Office also has a fiscal team, really, that all Commonwealth countries are eligible to use.
Yeah, that has been done, except that this has taken a number of years. I mean, since about 13 years ago, since year 2000, we've been talking about this bill, and it has actually arrested investment in that sector. More importantly, when you look at other parts of the world, East Africa, Angola, Ghana, and all that, discoveries are being made, and investors are flocking into those areas. Do you think this is healthy for the development of the upstream sector for Nigeria, food dragging on PIB for over a decade?
Certainly it's not. It cannot be healthy that people cannot plan. you need to make investment decisions, and investment decisions are based on what the numbers, what's going to impact the numbers, the tax, the royalty, the rentals. People want to know. But having said that, the last 3 years has witnessed an unprecedented era of acquisitions in Nigeria. You found local companies acquiring into significant oil and gas fields.
By the
They are aware of the uncertainties around the PIB. They're making the investments. So, yes, we know that there are uncertainties and we know that it has impacted investment, but people still recognize that Nigeria is an attractive region.
Yeah, except that the big players are being cautious.
Agreed. I mean, I don't dispute this. I think that if you look at the rest of Africa, you look at Uganda, you look at Kenya, some of these countries have just recently discovered oil and gas. They've taken, I think, a very, very aggressive approach towards their legislation. I don't think Uganda has passed that legislation yet, but it's moved fairly quickly through their own version of the National Assembly, through their parliament. And Kenya has put in place proposals for their own new legislation, even though they haven't discovered oil and gas to a significant degree. We need to move, and we need to move quickly. I think that the pace of legislation on this has been significantly slow, and that problem is not one that I lay exclusively at the National Assembly's footsteps. The National Assembly came with the bill was actually brought to the National Assembly in 2008, and the government proceeded to make significant amendments to the bill that the executive brought to the National Assembly, and then that went through the motions. What I'm saying is, we have a bill now in front of the National Assembly. It's been there since July. I don't think that continuous interference by the executive in the bill that they have placed would be healthy. I'm not saying that they're doing that, but learning from the experience of the last time.
That the executive should allow the National Assembly.
It's in the National Assembly. Let them run it. Let them run the process. Let them get the best advice possible. And let them take the right decisions. That's what they've been elected for.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. We strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
Viewers, I'm sure you find this edition truly engaging. Join us next week to watch our expert dissect other controversial clauses of PIB. Till I come your way next week, I'm Ademola Adedoyin. Bye for now.